Adrian Cole considered himself the most important, invisible man in the galaxy. He stood in an alcove behind a curtain of synthesized silk, nursing a glass of bubbling liquid that tasted faintly of copper. Officially, his title was Senior Cultural Analyst for the Terran Commonwealth. Unofficially, he was the delegation's word polisher and coffee fetcher. He was the man they called when a speech needed to sound less like a threat, and the man they blamed when the media misinterpreted it anyway. He was secretly a mimeticist. He didn't just understand language. He understood the underlying mathematics of belief. He saw culture as code, religion as an operating system, and a diplomatic negotiation as a battle of psychological viruses. And right now, he was hiding because his boss, Director Helena Ward, had given him one simple, ironclad order. Cole, you are a ghost. You do not exist. You stand in the back. You do not speak. And you do not, under any circumstances, make eye contact with the Empress. One media incident, just one. She had hissed at him 2 hours ago. And I will personally have you reassigned to waste reclamation on Titan. He understood. He was radioactive. His last assignment had involved a minor linguistic error that had been interpreted by the Cathal Hive as a declaration of eternal blood feud. It had taken 3 weeks and a shipment of prototype terraforming engines to smooth that over. So he watched. The Helix Summit Station was a monument to nervous optimism. It hung in the void like a glass spine, orbiting a planet of no consequence, belonging to no one. It was the designated neutral ground chosen to end the 30-year war. On one side of the Grand Hall, the Terran Commonwealth, humans, dressed in dark, functional diplomatic suits, forcing smiles, their body language screaming a desperate desire for this all to be over. On the other side, the Azure Imperium. They were beautiful and terrifying, averaging 7 feet tall. Their skin ranged from pale sky blue to a deep, midnight indigo. They moved with a predatory liquid grace, encased not in armor, but in biomimetic chitin that seemed to shift and flow like dark oil. Their eyes were solid black, like polished obsidian. Their entire society was a labyrinth of ritual, honor codes, and brutalist pageantry. To the Imperium, a contract was a blood oath. A trade agreement was a form of courtship, and a peace treaty. Adrian knew from his frantic studies, was indistinguishable from a marriage pact. And at their center, sitting on a throne of living, pearl-white biomaterial, was Empress Selkara. She was new. She was young. She had claimed her throne only 6 months prior, not through gentle succession, but by winning a savage civil war against her uncle, the regent Lord Cadron. Adrian watched her, his analyst's mind clicking away. She was a mimetic singularity. The hardline aristocrats and military conveners surrounding her were hawks. They smelled weakness. They saw her attempts at peace as a betrayal of their warrior ethos. She was projecting serene, untouchable authority. But Adrian could see the tension in the micro-muscles of her jaw. She was balancing a universe on the edge of a knife. The tension in the room was so thick, it was a gravitational force. Decades of war, trillions in currency, billions of lives, all of it resting on this one cocktail party. One wrong word, one mistimed gesture, and it all went to plasma fire. The incident, when it happened, was predictably banal. A portly, blue-skinned nobleman, Lord Vorlag, was making a toast. He was of the old guard, his face a roadmap of aristocratic arrogance. His voice, a resonant baritone, was being processed by the hovering auto-translate drones. "We acknowledge this gesture from the Terran species," Vorlag boomed, his obsidian eyes sweeping over the human delegation with contempt. "Though one must question the validity of an accord with a race that possesses no binding honor, a race that shifts its allegiances like the wind. How can one forge a pact with those who are so—" He used a word in the Imperium High Lexicon, a complex term, Kashal Na. The translator drone word, processed, and broadcast the Terran equivalent in its placid, synthesized voice, biologically incomplete. The silence that fell was not silence. It was the sound of 1,000 people sucking in their breath at once. It was the sound of safeties being clicked off on Terran pulse rifles. It was the sound of Imperium warriors gripping the hilts of their charged blades. Director Ward went to the corpse pale. Biologically incomplete was not just an insult. It was the legal classification the Imperium used for non-sentient pests. It was a dehumanization. Lord Vorlag smiled, a slow showing of sharp, white teeth. He knew exactly what he had said. He had just torpedoed the summit. The war was back on. Adrian felt something move inside him. It wasn't bravery. It was annoying. A profound, systemic annoyance at the sheer, tragic stupidity of it all. He saw the pattern, the insult, the required Terran outrage, the Imperium's justification of that outrage, the walkout, the resumption of war. It was a script, and they were all following it. He broke the pattern, before his brain could tell his legs to stop. Adrian Cole stepped out from behind the curtain. Every eye in the hall, human, Imperium, and media drones snapped to him. The coffee boy, the ghost. Director Ward looked as though she was simultaneously having a stroke and witnessing a miracle. She was mouthing a word at him. It looked like no. Adrian walked calmly into the center of the room. He was 5'9". He felt like a child. He stopped a respectful distance from the dais, facing Lord Vorlag, but angling his body toward the Empress. He was terrified, but his voice, when it came, was smooth. He bypassed the translator and spoke in flawless, high-ritual Imperium. "Lord Vorlag," Adrian said, his voice cutting through the stunned quiet. The nobleman looked down at him, baffled. "You speak the old tongue, human." "Only enough to get myself into trouble, my lord," Adrian said with a small, self-deprecating bow. "I must apologize to our translators. They are clumsy things. They lack the poetry of your language. Surely the word you intended was not incomplete, but rather unbound." Vorlag narrowed his eyes. "The meaning is the same." "Ah, but it is not," Adrian countered, letting a tone of academic curiosity enter his voice. "A thing that is incomplete is flawed, worthless, but a thing that is unbound is merely free, wild. It is a creature of potential, like a comet, perhaps, or a new star." He smiled. "We humans are, as you say, a messy species. We value change. We are chaotic, but we are not incomplete." He then turned his full attention to the Empress. Selkara was watching him. Her face was perfectly, terrifyingly still. He had to end this. He had to defuse the bomb. He needed a gesture that would break the tension, satisfy their need for ritual. But be so absurd, it couldn't be taken seriously. Humor, sarcasm. The one human meme they truly did not understand. He executed a clumsy half-kneel, somewhere between a Terran proposal and an Imperium submission. It was ridiculous. He raised his glass of terrible copper champagne. "Your Imperial Majesty," he announced, his voice ringing with false bravado. "Lord Vorlag is correct on one point. Our words are cheap. You require a true show of goodwill, a binding gesture." He was riffing. He was horrified to hear the words leaving his own mouth. This was the exact opposite of being a ghost. "If Her Majesty requires proof of Terran sincerity," Adrian declared, "if you need a bond that even our chaotic nature cannot break, then I, a humble analyst, will just propose a union. To seal the treaty, it would be," he finished, searching for the right word, "most efficient." He grinned, expecting laughter, confusion, perhaps a diplomatic incident of another kind. He did not expect the silence that followed. It was a new silence, a vacuum. It was the sound of the entire galaxy holding its breath. Adrian's smile faltered. He looked at Director Ward. She was no longer pale. She was a shade of gray he had never seen before. She was shaking her head, a tiny, frantic motion. He looked at Lord Vorlag. The nobleman was not angry. He was stunned. His mouth was open. He looked at Empress Selkara. She had not moved, but her obsidian eyes were fixed on him. And for the first time, he saw something in them. A flicker, an intellectual fire, a calculation. A slow, deliberate smile touched the corner of her lips. "A bold gesture," she said, her voice soft, but it carried across the entire hall. She spoke first in Terran Basic, for the media drones. From an unexpected source. Then, she rose from her throne. She was magnificent, a column of royal blue and pearlescent armor. She switched to the high ritual tongue, and her voice became a proclamation. The Azure Imperium values sincerity above all else. We value sacrifice. We recognize the formula when it is spoken. We recognize the plea of the bond pact. Adrian's blood turned to ice. Formula. What formula? He felt a cold dread crawl up his spine. Oh no. The jokes. The half-remembered anthropological files. Imperium diplomacy is matrimonial. The treaty is a marriage. He had just, in the name of the first stars, and the last void, Empress Selkara declared, her voice resonating with power. The Azure Imperium accepts this proposal. The treaty is bound. The Union, she looked directly at Adrian, is sanctified. The room exploded. It was pure, unadulterated chaos. The human delegation was screaming. What did he say? He's not authorized. Invalidate it. Invalidate it now. Media drones swarmed forward, their lights blinding. The Imperium side was just as fractured. Lord Vorlag was sputtering, his face turning a shade of purple. Majesty, this is an outrage. He is a lesser species. This is an insult to the bloodline. But another, younger noble, shouted over him. No, it is genius. She has bound them. She has used their own pet to forge the chain. How glorious! Adrian was frozen. He was still on one knee, his glass held aloft. He had just, through a badly constructed sarcastic joke, accidentally married himself to the ruler of a hostile alien empire and, in doing so, apparently signed a peace treaty the Commonwealth government had not even approved. He was the single most catastrophic diplomat in human history. Empress Selkara raised one hand. Instant silence. The authority in that simple gesture was absolute. She radiated a power that humbled every person in the room. She addressed the frantic media drones, her voice a perfect mask of serene calm. There has been a breakthrough, she announced. The Terran Commonwealth and the Azure Imperium have, on this day, sealed a preliminary peace accord. It has been guaranteed not by flimsy words or digital script, but by the most sacred and unbreakable law of the Imperium, an interspecies matrimonial bond. She gestured, almost regally, down at Adrian. He looked like a man who had just been electrocuted. I introduce, she said, her voice softening just enough to be terrifying. Adrian Cole of Terra, my chosen mate candidate. Adrian finally found his voice. It came out as a squeak. What no? Wait, Your Majesty. That was a metaphor, a rhetorical flourish. It was a joke. Selkara glided down the steps of the dais until she was standing directly over him. She looked down, her obsidian eyes unreadable. We do not joke about treaties. Analyst Cole, she said, her voice a private whisper that only he could hear. And we never joke about marriage. Two towering Imperial guards, clad in the living, shifting chitin, stepped forward. They moved with an unsettling silence. They took positions on either side of him. Director Ward finally broke through the crowd. Your Majesty, this is a profound misunderstanding. Analyst Cole has zero authority to make any treaty. The Commonwealth formally invalidates this farce. Selkara did not even turn to look at her. Her eyes remained locked on Adrian. The word was spoken. "Director," she said, her voice hardening. The ritual formula was offered, and it was accepted before the eyes of the galaxy. To retract it now would be the single greatest dishonor in our history. It would, she paused, mean immediate and total war. I trust that is not what you want, she smiled. It was not a kind smile. But do not worry, Director. We value this gesture. We will protect our new asset. The guards took Adrian's arms. The grip was not painful, but it was absolute. It was like being held by two hydraulic presses. "Helena!" Adrian yelled, panic finally cutting through his shock. "Don't let them tell them it was a mistake. He will be an honored guest aboard my flagship, the Seraphael," Selkara announced, turning to the media. "He must be protected. He must prepare for the rites." They began to pull him away. He dug his heels in, but it was useless. He looked back at Director Ward. Her face was no longer angry or panicked. It was cold, calculating. He could see the gears turning. He was no longer her problem. He was a complication, a piece to be sacrificed. His comlink in his ear, his connection to the human delegation, crackled with a burst of sharp static, and then went dead. A local jamming field. He was cut off. The great doors of the hall opened. He was being dragged from the light into the shadows of an Imperial transport corridor. The last thing Adrian Cole saw before the doors sealed was Empress Selkara. She was watching him be taken, her expression perfectly neutral. But as the doors hissed shut, plunging him into the blue half-light of the Imperial ship, he thought he saw it. The faintest, most terrifying trace of amusement. He hadn't saved the day. He hadn't stopped the war. He had just become the grand prize, the willing hostage, the cosmic punchline. And he had just volunteered for it. He awoke to the sound of breathing. It was not his own. It was a low, resonant, systemic hum. It was the sound of the ship around him. Adrian Cole sat up, his head throbbing. The room was not made of metal and plastic, but of something that looked like polished, honey-colored bone, inlaid with veins of soft, bioluminescent blue light. The air smelled of ozone and, faintly, roses. He was lying on a pallet of moss-like fibers that was unnervingly soft. He was wearing a simple, gray silk tunic. His diplomatic suit, his comms, his entire identity, was gone. "He is awake," a voice said. Not from the room, but from outside it. The door, which had been a seamless part of the wall, dilated open like the iris of an eye. Two guards stood there. They were the same Imperial Praetorians from the summit, their bodies encased in the glistening, beetle-black bioarmor that seemed more grown than forged. They carried no visible weapons, but they were the most dangerous-looking things Adrian had ever seen. One of them, slightly taller than the other, stepped inside. He held a cascade of elaborate, heavy-looking robes in dark blue and silver. "Consort designate," the guard said. His voice was a gravelly baritone, filtered through his helmet. "You will be cleansed and attired for your presentation." Adrian scrambled against the curved wall. "Look, there has been a massive misunderstanding. My name is Adrian Cole. I am a Terran analyst. I am not whatever that is." "You are the consort designate," the guard repeated, his tone utterly flat. He held out the robes. "These are the robes of the first bond. It is a great honor." "No, you don't understand," Adrian said, his voice rising in panic. "It was a joke joke, a form of speech intended for humor. It was sarcasm. I was not serious." The guard tilted his head. The gesture was bird-like and unsettling. "Our law does not recognize humor," in a ritual declaration. You spoke the words. The Empress accepted. The bond pact is sealed in the eyes of the stars. To deny it now is to declare war. Are you declaring war? Consort designate. I'm declaring a headache. Adrian snapped. I am not a consort. I am a coffee fetcher. I write speeches. I am not marrying your Empress. The guard, Kyrus, simply stood there, holding the robes. He was an 8-foot-tall mountain of living armor, and he was not going to be debated. The Empress awaits. You will be attired. Or what? Adrian challenged his bravado, paper-thin. Kyrus did not answer. He simply took one step forward. The sheer, passive menace was enough. Fine. Adrian spat, snatching the robes. Fine. But I am going on record as being deeply, profoundly, and apocalyptically uncomfortable with this entire situation. 20 minutes later, Adrian felt like a fool. The robes were impossibly heavy, stitched with metallic thread, and what looked like tiny, living gems that pulsed with light. He was escorted through the flagship Seraphael. It was less a ship than a mobile cathedral. The corridors were vast, the ceilings impossibly high, held up by buttresses of the same polished bone. Blue light flowed through the walls like blood. Crew members, tall and blue-skinned, moved with silent purpose, their black eyes sliding over Adrian, a mixture of contempt and disbelief. He was curious, a pet. He was brought to the bridge. It was a cavernous dome that offered a view of the star-strewn void. The Helix station was already a shrinking marble behind them. They were moving, fast. Empress Selkara stood in the center, not on a throne, but on a simple raised platform. She was in her armor, and she commanded the space. But she was not alone. Standing to her right was an older male of the Imperium. He was taller than her, his skin a paler, almost icy blue. Scars marked his face, one of them dragging his lip into a permanent, faint sneer. His bio-armor was dark, almost black, and seemed bristling with edges. This was not a diplomat. This was a warrior. Ah, the male said, his voice a low growl. The specimen arrives. Tell me, Majesty, does it perform tricks? Selkara's voice was cold steel. Regent Lord Kadrin, you will respect consort designate. He is my guest. Kadrin. Her uncle, the man she had defeated in the Civil War, the leader of the Warhawks. He looked at Adrian, his obsidian eyes filled with a loathing so pure, it was almost art. Guest, Kadrin laughed, a harsh, barking sound. You have bound our sacred Imperium to this soft-fleshed primate. You shame your bloodline, Selkara. End this farce. Eject it from an airlock and let us resume the war your father so wisely prosecuted. The war, Selkara said, her voice dangerously quiet, is over. Uncle, the bond pact is sealed. My word is law. Your word, Kadrin hissed, has made us a laughingstock. You have weakened us. You have made us vulnerable. I have secured peace, something your brute force failed to do for 30 years. She turned to him fully. You are dismissed, Lord Regent. I will speak with my consort alone. Kadrin's face tightened. The insult was public, a sharp slap. He bowed, a mockery of respect. As you wish, Majesty. He stalked past Adrian, pausing just long enough to look him up and down. Enjoy your brief time, human. The stars have a way of cleansing impurities. He was gone. The bridge crew remained at their posts, silent as statues. Selkara gestured, and the platform they stood on became enclosed by a shimmering field of blue energy. A privacy screen. She turned to Adrian, and the Empress mask dissolved. Her shoulders slumped slightly. She ran a hand over her face, and when she spoke, her voice was different, tired, wry. You are a delightful little catastrophe. Analyst Cole. Adrian, still reeling from Kadrin, just stared at her. "You have to let me go. This is insane. Your uncle is going to kill me." "Probably," she agreed, stepping closer. She was still a foot taller than him. "But not while I am alive." "But it was a joke," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "I know," she said simply. The word hit him harder than a physical blow. "Did you know?" "Oh, of course I knew," she said, pacing around him, looking him over as if he were an interesting piece of art. "You were radiating terror. You were sweating. Your pupils were dilated. And your ritual grammar was, frankly, atrocious. It was a miracle the bond formula was even intelligible." "Then why?" he whispered. "Why did you accept? You could have just laughed. You could have had me arrested. You ruined my life." She stopped in front of him. Her black eyes were unreadable. "My uncle, and the entire military convener, and half the old blood aristocracy, want this war. They live for it. It is their power. It is their meaning. They have bound me, since the day I took the throne, in a cage of their own laws. A cage of ritual, honor, and sacred duty. They built it to control me." She leaned in, her voice dropping. "And then you appeared. A nervous little man with a ridiculous, desperate, and perfectly legal ritual proposal. You, Analyst Cole, were not a catastrophe. You were a crowbar. You handed me the one tool I needed to break their cage." Adrian's mind was spinning. "You're using me. You're using me as a political shield." "Of course I am," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "And you, in turn, are using me to stay alive. We are now bound, you and I. I have used their own rules to trap them. The treaty is now sacred. To break it, they must first get through you. And to get through you, they must defy the Empress and the sacred laws they claim to worship. You see, you are the most powerful human in the galaxy. You are also the most wanted." She smiled, and for the first time, it reached her eyes. It was a terrifying, brilliant smile. "So, no, I will not be letting you go. Welcome to the Imperium, consort designate." The days that followed were a blur of gilded captivity. Adrian was given luxurious quarters, guarded day and night by Kyrus and his silent partner, a warrior named Rykov. He was a prisoner in all but name, cut off from his people. He stewed. He was trapped. He saw the news feeds Selkara allowed him. The Terran Commonwealth was spinning the story. He was a brave cultural envoy, undertaking a deep immersion protocol to solidify the new armistice. It was all lies. He knew what was happening back on the Helix. Director Helena Ward sat in her sterile office, the station's lights glittering outside. The face on her secure screen was shadowed, the voice synthesized but dripping with corporate authority. "He is a problem, Director. The markets despise uncertainty. This bond is too fragile. It relies on one low-level, unstable analyst." "He was not unstable," Ward snapped, her usual composure gone. "He was a linguist. I told him to fetch coffee." "His instability is now a liability," the voice said. "The Military-Industrial Board is not pleased. This armistice is costing us trillions in projected defense contracts. The Imperium must be seen as a viable threat. This peace cannot hold." Ward felt a cold dread. "What are you suggesting?" "The treaty is tied to him," the voice stated. "The Imperium's own absurd laws state that if the consort dies before the final rites, the bond is void, an act of fate. The treaty dissolves. The war resumes. Our projections return to acceptable levels." "You want me to sacrifice him," Ward said, the word tasting like ash. "We want you to solve the problem, Director. We have assets in place, loyal to Kadrin. They are willing to create an opportunity, a tragic accident. Your only job is to do nothing. When they ask for confirmation that Cole acted alone, that he was a rogue element, you will give it. You will burn him, Director, for the good of the Commonwealth. The channel clicked off. Helena Ward sat silently, her face carved from ice. She had her orders. Adrian didn't know the specifics, but he could feel the noose tightening. He was reading between the lines of the news. Editorials, funded by military contractors, were already painting him as a rogue element, a sympathizer. They were not building a rescue plan. They were building a legal case to disown him. He was trapped. Lord Cadron wanted him dead to break the peace. His own government wanted him dead to break the peace. He was the single point of failure. He was the man everyone needed to kill. A strange, cold fury began to replace his panic. It was the old, familiar feeling of being the smartest man in the room, and the only one getting screwed. They thought he was a pawn, a coffee boy, a pet. "You're making a mistake," he muttered to the silent wall of his quarters. "You have no idea who I am." His anger needed a target. He found it in Kairos. The guard was a silent, massive sentinel at his door. "You really believe this, don't you?" Adrian said one day, pacing. "All this sacred bond nonsense." Kairos stood unmoving. "The Empress has spoken. The law is the law." "But it's stupid," Adrian insisted. "It's inefficient. It's based on superstition, not logic." "Your logic gave you a 30-year war you could not win," Kairos rumbled, his head tilting. "Your logic is chaotic and weak. You have no honor." "No honor. We have compassion. We have empathy," Adrian shot back. "We also have a highly developed sense of the absurd." Kairos just stared. "Absurd." "Yes, like look." Adrian grabbed a data pad. "In my culture, we have things called memes." For the next hour, Adrian, fueled by frustration and a desperate need to connect, tried to explain Earth memes to a 7-foot-tall alien warrior. He tried to explain irony, sarcasm, the concept of laughing at misfortune. Kairos was, at first, contemptuous. "This is illogical. You speak falsehoods to imply truths." "Exactly," Adrian said. "It's flexible. It's mental agility. We can hold two opposing ideas in our heads at the same time. We can fight with words that don't mean what they say. It's how we cope." He showed him a picture of a cat, looking grumpy, with text over it. Kairos studied it for a minute. "The small, furry predator is displeased," Kairos said. "Is this a symbol of cosmic dissatisfaction?" "You're getting it," Adrian exclaimed. "Your minds are convoluted," Kairos decided. "You wrap your thoughts in layers of untruth. It is fascinating and dangerous. A mind that is flexible could also be a mind without a core." "The core is that we survive," Adrian said, softly. "We adapt. We laugh at the dark. Can your honor do that?" Kairos did not answer. But for the first time, he looked at Adrian Cole, not as a pet, but as a very strange, very unpredictable weapon. The respect was grudging, but it was there. That evening, he was summoned by Selkara again. This time, it was not the bridge. It was her private quarters. They were vast, but warmer. Bookshelves were filled with alien scrolls and glowing data crystals. She was not in armor. She wore a simple, dark blue robe. She was still an empress, but she was also, for the first time, just a woman. She was exhausted. "Your presence on my ship is causing complications," she said, pouring a dark liquid into 2 cups. She handed one to him. It smelled like tea. "My presence," Adrian said, his anger flaring. "Your uncle is trying to kill me. My own government is painting me as a traitor, and you're just using me." "And you are using me to stay alive," she countered, her own voice rising. "Do not play the victim. Analyst Cole. You stumbled onto the biggest stage in the galaxy and decided to perform a comedy routine. These are the consequences." This stage is a bloodbath, he yelled. Your uncle wants war. My bosses want war. You're all the same, just different flags. You talk about honor and law, but it's just a system to keep you in power. You don't care who gets crushed in the gears. How dare you, she snapped, her eyes flashing. I am trying to save my people from a war that has bled us for a generation. This system, as you call it, is all that stands between us and anarchy. You humans, you come from your unbound worlds of chaos and comfort, and you judge us, you who almost annihilated your own planet twice, in 1 century over matters of economics. We, who value the individual, Adrian shot back. We, who would not sacrifice one innocent person for the good of the system. You, your people. You're all just code-rigid, cold, unfeeling code. You'd kill me in a second if it served your precious law. The argument raged for an hour. They tore at each other's philosophies. He called her a tyrant, bound by hollow ritual. She called him a child, blind to the necessities of rule. They were raw, honest, and furious. It was the first real conversation he'd had since leaving Earth. Finally, they stood, panting, on opposite sides of the room. The anger had burned, leaving a strange, vibrating respect. You really believe it, don't you? Adrian said, his voice quiet. That you're doing the right thing. I am doing the only thing, she said, her voice heavy with the weight of her crown. I am doing what must be done. Can you say the same? He had no answer. He turned to leave. At the door, he paused. You know, he said, in my world, we have an animal. It's called a mule. It is the most stubborn, illogical, and honorable creature in the universe. It will carry a burden until it dies. But if it decides it doesn't want to move, you cannot make it. Not with threats, not with logic, not with kindness. It just is. She frowned. And the point of this mule is... I think your uncle is a mule, Adrian said. And I think you are. And I'm sure I am too. This is going to be a very, very long treaty. He left. Selkara stood in the silence of her room. She stared at the door. Her face was an imperial steel mask, but her lips twitched. And then, in the absolute privacy of her chambers, Empress Selkara, ruler of the Azure Imperium, let out a small, choked laugh. It was, perhaps, the first in years. The peace did not last long. 3 days later, the ship's internal gravity failed for a second, lurching violently. Alarms blared. Red lights flashed through the bone-white corridors. Kairos burst into his room, pulse rifle in hand, the first time Adrian had seen one. We are under attack, the guard roared. He grabbed Adrian by the arm and dragged him. By whom, Terra? No, Kairos snarled. By us. He hauled Adrian to a viewport. Outside, hanging in the black, were 3 Imperium battlecruisers. They were dark, menacing, their weapons glowing. They were firing. But the shots were wrong. They were warning shots, sloppy. They were striking the outer shields, but not trying to penetrate. This isn't an attack, Adrian breathed, his analyst's mind kicking in. This is posturing, a demonstration. It is treason, Kairos yelled, pulling him toward the bridge. The bridge was controlled chaos. Officers were shouting reports. Hull integrity at 92% shields are holding. Selkara was on her throne. She was a statue of calm in the storm. Hail them, she commanded. A holographic screen flickered to life. On it was Lord Kadrin. He was on his own flagship, his face a mask of false, deep concern. Majesty, he boomed. A terrible, terrible situation. A squadron of my ships have gone rogue. They are distraught. Over this bond. They are firing on their Empress, Selkara said, her voice dripping with ice. They are loyal to the Imperium. Majesty. Kadrin countered. They see the human as a contamination. They demand a gesture. To prove your loyalty is to your own people, not to an outworlder. The bridge went silent. Everyone was watching her. Adrian felt his blood run cold. This was it. The test. What gesture? Uncle Selkara asked, though she already knew. Give them the human, Kadrin said, his voice reasonable. A small price. Eject him in a pod. They will be satisfied, their honor restored, and I will personally escort them back to my fleet for justice. Avert this crisis. Selkara. Show your people where your heart truly lies. This was her out. She could end the standoff. She could appease the Warhawks. She could save her ship and crew. All she had to do was sacrifice the coffee boy. Adrian met her eyes across the bridge. He saw the calculation. He saw the weight of empires. He was, in that second, completely and totally alone. Selkara looked at the hologram of her uncle. Her voice was soft, but it cut through every sound on the bridge. Regent Lord. Majesty. You will remind your lost captains that the Seraphael is the Imperial flagship. You will remind them that I am their Empress, by blood, by combat, and by divine right. And you will remind them. Her voice dropped to a lethal whisper. What happens to those who point their weapons at the throne? She stood up. You will also remind them that the consort designate is, by sacred law, a part of my person. To demand him is to demand my own abdication. Fire on my ship again. Uncle and I will space you myself. From your own airlock. She raised her hand. Cut the channel. The screen went blank. The bridge was absolutely, profoundly silent. The only sound was the thrum of the engines. Adrian was breathing again. Kairos was staring at him, his helmet hiding his expression. But his entire posture had changed. It was no longer the look of a guard for a pet. It was the look of a bodyguard for a prince. Majesty, an officer whispered. The rogue ships are powering down weapons. Of course they are, Selkara said, sinking back onto her throne. She looked, just for a moment, impossibly weary. Set a course for Aurelian. We are going home. The Empress mask was firmly back in place. But Adrian had seen it. He was no longer a tool. He was a symbol. He was hers. And she had just, in front of her entire bridge crew and her most powerful rival, chosen him over an easy peace. The internal tensions were no longer a Cold War. She had just declared it. The Seraphael did not dock. It was absorbed. Adrian watched from an observation port as the ship descended from the void into the atmosphere of Aurelian. There was no ground. Below them was a roiling, planet-wide ocean of cream-colored clouds. Then, rising from that ocean like the spires of a forgotten cathedral, was the city. It was not a city. It was a single, interconnected organism. Towers of polished, pearl-white material scraped the sky, linked by graceful arches and bridges that seemed spun from glass. Veins of blue energy pulsed along the structures, a visible circulatory system. The flagship glided into a vast, flower-like opening that dilated to accept them, sealing shut with a sigh that seemed to echo across the entire planet. The moment the internal engines powered down, Adrian felt it. The air was different. It was heavy, humid, carrying the scent of ozone and 1,000 unknown pollens. The gravity was inconsistent. It was 95% of standard, but it seemed to shift slightly, ebbing and flowing like a tide. Even the light was wrong, filtered through the atmosphere to a perpetual, golden-hued twilight. He was no longer on a ship. He was inside a creature. "It is beautiful," he whispered. "It is home," Karis said from behind him. The guard's voice was filled with a reverence Adrian had never heard. "It is the heart of the Imperium, and it does not like outworlders." Kairos was not wrong. Life on Aurelian was a series of subtle, draining tests. The shifting gravity made him constantly dizzy. The curated, oxygen-rich atmosphere gave him headaches. The food was all semi-living, bioengineered flora that tasted like perfume and static. The day after their arrival, he was subjected to the rite of attunement. It was, he was told, a necessity for any non-native who wished to reside in the imperial palace. He was placed, naked, in a domed chamber. Then, the environment turned on him. The gravity fluctuated wildly, from crushing him against the floor to leaving him floating and nauseated. The temperature swung from Arctic frost to scalding jungle humidity. The very air changed its composition, forcing his lungs to labor. A court physician, a skeletal blue elder, watched from an observation window. "You must center yourself, consort designate," the doctor's voice echoed. "Find the one, true focus. Command your body. Deny the environment. It is the Imperium way." Adrian tried. He tried to center. He tried to be a rock. The environment simply broke against him, leaving him gasping and bruised. So he stopped being a rock. He became water. When the gravity slammed down, he didn't fight it. He exhaled and spread his weight, dissipating the force. When it vanished, he didn't flail. He used the wall to push into a controlled fetal position. When the air grew thin, he slowed his heart, not with discipline, but with the practiced mental calm of a man who had survived 1,000 boring bureaucratic meetings. He adapted. He bent. He endured. After 2 hours, the test ceased. The physician looked baffled. "He survived," the doctor announced, as if this were a shocking outcome. "His vital signs are chaotic, but stable. He did not master the environment. He yielded to it in a dozen different ways." "How Terran," Karis helped him out, throwing a robe over his shaking shoulders. The guard's grip was respectful. "You endured, consort designate. It is sufficient." Adrian, still dizzy, just nodded. "Good. Can I get a coffee and a normal toilet?" The request was, as always, ignored. His attunement was the prerequisite for the main event, his presentation to the Imperial High Council. The chamber was the single most intimidating place Adrian had ever been. It was a vast, circular cavern, deep within the planetary structure. It felt less like a room and more like the inside of a giant heart. The walls pulsed with a slow, deep crimson light. In the center sat Empress Selkara, on a simple, elegant throne of living white material. Surrounding her, in a tiered amphitheater, were the old blood. 50 of the most powerful aristocrats in the Imperium, led by Lord Regent Kadrin. They were not just sitting. They were plugged in. Each noble's throne had tendrils of the same white material snaking up their arms, connecting to their armor. A vast, glowing tapestry above them shifted and flowed. "What is that?" Adrian whispered to Karis, who stood guard at the entrance. "The Vox Animus," Karis replied. "The voice of the soul. It reads the truth. Their biosignatures, their pheromonal output, their sincerity. In this chamber, before the Empress, one cannot truly lie. One can only mislead." Adrian felt a cold spark of interest. A mimetic lie detector. "Selkara, my Empress, my niece," Kadrin began, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. He rose, his dark armor seeming to drink the light. "You have brought this creature into our sacred heart. You claim a bond pact. You claim this human is worthy of the bloodline of the first stars." He turned, and all 50 lords turned with him. Their collective gaze, those 100 obsidian eyes, fell on Adrian. He was standing, as protocol demanded, in a recessed petitioner's circle below them all, wearing the ridiculous silver and blue robes. He felt like an exotic insect about to be dissected. "We must ratify this," Kadrin continued. We must determine if the bond is valid, or if it is a contamination, a sickness brought by a desperate, lesser race. The bond is valid, Uncle, Selkara said, her voice steel. It was spoken. It was accepted. The law is clear. The law, Kadrin sneered, was written before we knew monkeys could speak. It presumes a partner of worth, of honor. What honor does this thing possess? It comes from a species that trades in falsehoods, a species that abandoned it the moment it became inconvenient. As if summoned by dark magic, a holographic display flickered to life in the center of the room. A Terran comm signal. On it, crisp and professional, was Director Helena Ward. Adrian's breath caught in his throat. Helena. She could not see him. The transmission was one way. Her face was a mask of calculated regret. She was addressing the entire Imperial Council. Imperial High Council, Empress Selkara, she began, her voice smooth and practiced. The Terran Commonwealth wishes to express its profound concern. We are, of course, overjoyed at the prospect of peace. However, she continued, we must clarify our position. Analyst Adrian Cole, while a brilliant linguist, has a recorded history of autonomous action, of compassionate overreach. Adrian stared, his blood turning to slush. Compassionate overreach. I was getting you coffee. His proposal was not sanctioned, Ward stated, her eyes cold. It was the impulsive, unilateral act of a low-level employee. We cannot in good faith recognize it as a binding act of state. Kadrin smiled. He had known this was coming. This was his checkmate. So you abandon him, Kadrin asked, his voice dripping with false sympathy. We acknowledge his difficult position, Ward said. But the stability of the entire quadrant must come first. The Commonwealth formally declares Analyst Cole a rogue element, acting outside of any official capacity. The room was silent. Adrian felt the stares of the 50 lords, contempt, disgust, and, from Kadrin, triumph. Then, Director Ward delivered the killing blow. We understand, she said, her voice softening into a poisonous whisper, that your laws are complex. Should a tragic accident befall Analyst Cole during his acclimation, we would understand. It would be a tragedy, of course, but it would simplify matters. It would allow us to reset the diplomatic table. The Commonwealth would be prepared to move forward without this complication. The transmission ended. Adrian stood perfectly still. He was not shocked. He was not sad. He was calculating. The last, frayed tether to his old life, his old loyalties, had just been severed, burned, atomized. They hadn't just disowned him. They hadn't just left him to die. They had requested his execution. They had signed his death warrant to protect their quarterly earnings. A slow, cold, and utterly precise fury began to crystallize in his chest. The ghost, the coffee boy, the self-deprecating analyst died. And something new, something sharp and dangerous, began to take its place. You see, Majesty, Kadrin boomed into the silence. His own people declare him worthless. They beg us to dispose of him. This is not a consort. This is refused. I call upon the Council. Nullify this bond. Purge this contamination. Let us deal with the Terrans as they deserve. The Vox Animus tapestry above them flared with angry, jagged reds and oranges. The sincerity of the Council was clear. They were with Kadrin. The bond is legal, Selkara repeated, but her voice was strained. She was trapped. That is the one, simple truth. Then he must break it, a lord shouted. Yes, Kadrin agreed. Let us hear from the primate itself. Tell us, humans. Was it a lie? Was it a Terran trick? All eyes were on him. This was the moment. He could end it. He could confess. He could say, yes, It was a joke, a mistake. I am a rogue. They would kill him. But the Commonwealth would get its war, and Kadrin would get his. Everyone wins. Except him. Or he looked up, not at Kadrin, but at Selkara. He saw the desperation in her eyes, hidden behind the mask. She was drowning. He decided he was not going to die for Helena Ward. "No," Adrian said, his voice quiet but carrying in the perfect acoustics. Kadrin frowned. "What did you say, creature?" "I said no," Adrian repeated, stepping forward. He looked at Director Ward's fading icon. "My former director is a pragmatist. She sees a board, and she sacrifices a pawn to save a king. A logical move, from a Terran perspective." He then looked at Kadrin. "But you, Lord Regent, you are not a Terran." "I am a true son of the Imperium," Kadrin roared. "And your laws are everything," Adrian continued, his mind racing. He was seeing it. The connections. The code. "Your laws state that a bond, once accepted by the Empress, is sacred, correct? It is, a lord confirmed. And to break it would be dishonorable, correct? It would. Director Ward has just committed a profound act of dishonor," Adrian said, his voice gaining strength. "She has disavowed her own words. She has invalidated her own people. She has proven that Terran words are cheap." He paused, letting that sink in. "But my word," he said, tapping his own chest, "is not. My proposal was sincere. It was a desperate plea for peace, spoken in the only language you would understand, a language of sacrifice. And I will not retract it. I will not commit the same dishonor as my former masters. My bond is with the Empress." The Vox Animus tapestry flickered. The angry reds softened to a confused, swirling blue and yellow. They were uncertain. He had just inverted the logic. Selkara saw it. A flicker of something in her eyes. Hope. "He speaks of honor," a lord murmured, baffled. "He lies," Kadrin spat, but his certainty was shaken. "It is a Terran trick. He is a mimeticist, a mind twister." "I am a linguist," Adrian said calmly. "And I am the consort designate, and I will not be sacrificed by either side." He had survived. He was alive. But he was now, officially, an enemy of the Terran Commonwealth, and he was still a prisoner of the Imperium. Later that night, another visitor came to his chambers. The guards, Kairos and Rykov, were forcibly removed by a contingent of Kadrin's personal council guard. The Lord Regent himself entered, the doors hissing shut behind him. He did not sit. He loomed. "A clever performance, little man," Kadrin growled. "You have bought your Empress a few more hours. You have confused the old fools on the council." "I told the truth," Adrian said, his heart hammering. He was alone with the monster. "Truth," Kadrin scoffed. "There is no truth. There is only power, and you have none. Your people have abandoned you. My niece is using you as a meat shield. She is weak. She is destroying our way of life with this peace." He stepped closer. "But you are interesting. You have a flexible mind. A slippery mind. I can see why your people feared you." "What do you want?" "An offer," Kadrin said. "A real one. Not the pathetic whisper from your former masters. You want to live. You want to go home. You want your freedom." Adrian waited. "My niece. She is blinded by her desire for change. She is a fool. She has bound herself to you. Make her look like a fool. Publicly renounce the bond. But do not do it as a mistake. Do it as an insult. Declare that you, a Terran, tested her, and found her, and her entire sacred system, to be a fraud. Declare it a Terran conquest. A social victory." Adrian's eyes widened. He was suggesting mimetic warfare. "Embarrass her," Kadrin hissed. "Break her credibility. The council will be forced to depose her. I will take the regency. I will stabilize the Imperium. And in the chaos, your escape will be arranged. My ships will deliver you to a neutral system. You will be free. A hero, even. The man who outsmarted the Imperium. Adrian saw the trap. It was the same as Ward's, just dressed in different robes. One Viper wanted him dead to break the treaty. This Viper wanted him to become a weapon to break the Empress. You are trapped, little man, Kadrin said, seeing the calculation on his face. This is your only way out. Choose her pawn, or your own man. He left. Adrian was left alone in the silence. He was a man with 2 death sentences. He was the single most valuable and most expendable man in the galaxy. He was cornered. And when he was cornered, his mind did not panic. It worked. He stopped thinking about survival. He started thinking about revenge. He was not a pawn. He was a player. And these 2-bit tyrants had just shown him the rules of the game. He called for Kairos. The guard returned, his faceplate unreadable. I need access, Adrian said. To the Imperial Archives. The legal code. All of it. The deep protocols. Kairos tilted his head. That is not permitted. I am the consort designate, Adrian said, his voice cold and hard. I am to be one with the Empress. I am to be one with the law. How can I do so if I do not know the law, or, he added, do you serve Lord Kadrin now? That was the correct move. Kairos stiffened. I serve the Empress, and her bonded. I will see to it. For 3 days, Adrian did not sleep. He consumed the entire legal and ritual history of the Azure Imperium. It was a mess. 1 billion years of laws, stacked one on top of the other. Patches, contradictions, ancient subroutines, forgotten protocols. It was, as he had suspected, code. And it was the sloppiest, most bug-ridden code he had ever seen. And he found it. A series of ancient, pre-war protocols. The covenants of first contact. Laws so old. No one had cited them in millennia. Laws about truth. He got his test case 2 days later. He was summoned to sit beside Selkara, a symbolic gesture, as she heard minor petitions. A fussy, old nobleman, Lord Xylo, was complaining. He wanted rights to a mining asteroid, claiming it had been promised to his family by Selkara's father. Majesty, my honor demands this I file a plea of grievance, he declared. Selkara looked bored and annoyed. Lord Xylo, that claim was invalidated. Adrian held up a hand. A tiny, subtle gesture. Selkara paused, surprised. My apologies. Lord Xylo, Adrian said, his voice polite and curious. As a newcomer, I must learn. The ritual form you just used is the plea of grievance, correct from the second covenant of law. Xylo sniffed, arrogant. Of course, humans. Any fool knows that. Ah, thank you, Adrian said with a warm smile. But my reading of the First Covenant, the Protocol of Truth, states that a plea of grievance can only be filed if the honor of the First Blood has been violated. Did Her Majesty personally violate your honor? Lord Xylo froze. The vox animus above him flickered. Saying yes was treason. To say no was to admit, and I am so sorry. I am still learning. Adrian continued, his voice dripping with false humility. But does not the First Covenant also state that to file a plea of grievance, falsely, is to forfeit the very claim you are grieving and all adjacent claims as a falsehood against the bloodline? Lord Xylo's face went from pale blue to a deep, dark purple. He opened his mouth. No sound came out. He had just, by invoking a law he did not fully understand, legally forfeited his entire family fortune. Oh dear, Adrian said, looking concerned. Have I misspoken? My apologies. I am still learning. Please, Majesty, continue. Lord Xylo let out a sound like a strangled cat. He bowed so low his head nearly hit the floor. Majesty, I withdraw my plea. A mistake. My apologies. He practically ran from the chamber. There was a long silence. Selkara was staring at Adrian. The mask was gone. She was utterly, profoundly stunned. What? She said, her voice a whisper. Did you just do? Well, Adrian said, straightening his robes. I just debugged his petition. He called a function that was dependent on a variable he had not declared. Sloppy. Very sloppy. Selkara stared at him, and a slow, terrifying, brilliant smile spread across her face. It was the same smile he had seen at the summit, but this time, it was for him. You are not a linguist, she breathed. You are not a coffee fetcher. I am a mimeticist, Adrian said. You, she corrected, are a weapon, a living weapon, and my uncle and your Director Ward have absolutely no idea what they have just unleashed. That night, they formed an alliance, not in the throne room, but in her private observatory, the stars of the Imperium wheeling below them. They are using the laws against me, she said. The old ways, the honor codes. They have twisted them to serve the Warhawks. So we stop using their code, Adrian said, his mind alive with 1,000 new, dangerous ideas. We go deeper. We use the original protocols, the ancient laws, the covenants of truth, the laws before the Warhawks. We don't just beat them, Selkara. We recompile the entire system. She looked at him, her obsidian eyes searching for him. This is dangerous. You are asking me to risk my throne on the word of an outworlder. I am the only one who can see it, he said simply. You are trapped inside the system. I am outside. I can read the source code, but I will not do it for free. Her eyes narrowed. Your price. The cold fury returned. My old masters, Director Ward, the military board that just ordered my assassination. When this is done, when your house is clean, we clean mine. We use this new bond, this new treaty, and the full power of your sacred laws, and we hold them accountable. No more hiding. No more sacrifices. Revenge. Selkara watched him for a long moment. He was not a pet. He was not a victim. He was a viper, like them. But he was her viper. She smiled. A true, predatory smile. They disrespected the bond pact. They disrespected my consort. They treated the Imperium as a complication. They will learn. Analyst Cole. Oh, they will learn. She held out her hand. He took it. It was not a romantic gesture. It was a contract. The first step was to reintroduce the treaty to the public, to bypass the council, and show the people of Aurelian that the human consort was not a monster. It was a public ceremony at Great Plaza. Tens of thousands of Imperium citizens gathered, their blue faces a mixture of curiosity and hostility. Kadrin and the council were there, watching, their faces like stone. Selkara spoke, her voice amplified. She spoke of peace. She spoke of a new future. She motioned to Adrian, standing beside her. He comes not as a conqueror, but as a partner, a symbol of... It happened in a microsecond. Adrian, his senses honed by the attunement. His analyst's mind always scanning saw it first. A flicker, a distortion in the air. Not a bullet. Something small, like a crystal hummingbird, zipping from the crowd. It was heading for Selkara's head. He did not think. He did not analyze. He acted. Down, he roared, and he shoved his Empress hard. He was a fraction of a second too late. He knocked her off balance. But the drone wasn't a projectile. It was a delivery system. It exploded in a cloud of fine, gray mist, right where her shoulder had been. The mist touched her armor. The living, pearlescent material hissed. It began to corrode, to dissolve like sugar in water. Selkara screamed, a high, sharp sound of pain as the mist touched her skin beneath. Chaos. Kairos and the royal guard surged forward, forming a shield wall. Empress hit, Empress is hit. The crowd panicked. But this was no normal panic. From within the crowd, voices, planted and ready, began to scream. The human. It came from him. A virus. He released a Terran plague. Treachery. He tried to kill the Empress. He poisoned her. Adrian, being shielded by a frantic Kairos, stared in horrified realization. It was a setup. A perfect, brutal setup. Lord Cadron surged forward, his face a mask of blazing, righteous fury. It was a masterful performance. Treason, he roared, pointing at Adrian. The human has shown his true colors. He has brought Terran plague to our very hearts. Seize him. Seize the assassin. The council guard, Cadron's personal troops, shoved past the royal guard. No, Selkara gasped, clutching her smoking arm, her face pale with shock and pain. He poisoned you, Majesty. Cadron bellowed. You are wounded, you are compromised. Secure the human. He must be contained. He must be judged. Kairos drew his blade. You will not touch the consort. Stand down. Kairos, Cadron ordered, or you will be executed for treason alongside him. It is a matter for the council, for the adjudicators. Adrian did not resist. He could see the checkmate. He had been outplayed. If he fought, Kairos would die, and it would be seen as proof of his guilt. He let the council guard seize him. Selkara, he yelled, as they dragged him away. She met his gaze, her face a mask of agony. She was being rushed away by her own physicians, her authority dissolving in the chaos. He was alone. Cadron watched him being dragged off, a look of cold, absolute triumph in his eyes. Adrian was not taken to a simple cell. He was taken to a tall, dark, spiraling tower at the edge of the plaza. A tower that seemed to be made of dark, throbbing, organic material. It looked alive. Where are you taking me? He demanded. To the Tower of the Adjudicators, the guard sneered. To the Mind Spire. It will interrogate your soul. And when it finds your guilt, human, we will cleanse this planet of your memory. The great, living doors of the tower dilated. He was thrown inside, into the darkness. He was trapped, awaiting a trial for a crime he did not commit, accused by a system he had only just begun to understand. The Mind Spire was no play. It was a stomachache. The walls were a dark, chitinous material that pulsed with a slow, hideously regular beat. The air was cold, recycled, and carried the faint, metallic tang of an electrical charge. Adrian sat on a slab of the same organic matter, his mind racing, the cold fury of his betrayal a solid, hot core in his chest. He was done being a pawn. He was done being a victim. He was a linguist, and a weapon was only a weapon if it was pointed at you. He intended to turn it around. He had been alone for 6 hours. He had examined every inch of his cell. There was no door, only a sealed iris. There was no interface, except one. A small, glowing node of the same blue bioluminescence from the Seraphael, embedded in the wall. It looked like a decoration. It was not. He had seen them in the deep archives. A palace interface. He pressed his palm to it. It was cold. A soft, synthesized voice, genderless and utterly neutral, spoke in his mind. Aurelian Palace Archive. Neutral interface. Awaiting query. It was not a person. It was the planet's operating system. Status of Empress Selkara, Adrian said, his voice hoarse. Empress Selkara. Vital signs stable. Injury class 4, corrosive agent. Localized to upper right quadrant. Tissue damage contained by biostasis field. Current status sequestered in Imperial Medical Bay, under council guard supervision. The key words hit him like bullets. Council guard, not her own royal guard. She is a prisoner, he whispered. Query, he said, his mind sharpening. Origin of bioassassination drone. Designation whatever it was. Processing. Drone designated corruptor class. Official attribution, Terran rogue element. Primary operative analyst Adrian Cole. Guilt determined by council mandate. It's already been decided, he spat. He was a dead man. Kadrin had already signed the order. The trial was just theater. He needed a new weapon. He had to assume his trial was unwinnable. He needed to find the real enemy. New query, he said, thinking fast. Cross-reference diplomatic incidents, treaty negotiations, and assassination attempts in imperial records. Time-stamped last 500 years. Processing. The query is broad. Refining. Refine query, Adrian pressed, his mimetic senses firing. Search for statistical anomalies. Look for patterns. Specifically, incidents involving foreign contamination, biological agents, or rogue element attributions, resulting in the failure of a peace-oriented treaty. There was a long silence. The node in the wall glowed brighter. Query complete, the voice said. And this time, it sounded different, colder. Pattern identified, statistical anomaly confirmed. Over the last 412 years, 92% of all major peace treaties negotiated with new, non-Imperium species have failed. Why? Adrian whispered. 'Cause catastrophic failure? In 90% of those instances, the failure was attributed to rogue elements, or biological accidents, originating from the non-Imperium delegation. All such incidents were subsequently cleansed by the Protocol of Cleansing Fire. Who authorized those protocols? Protocols are automated. They are managed by the... There was a pause, a screech of static in his head. Data redacted by Level 1 authority. What is the Level 1 authority? The treaty engine. Adrian's blood ran cold. The treaty engine. He had read whispers of it. It wasn't just an archive. It was something else. An ancient, deep-level artificial intelligence that supposedly managed the sanctity of imperial law. It wasn't Kadrin. Not entirely. Kadrin was just a user, exploiting a feature. The system itself was the enemy. The system was designed to prevent peace. The iris to his cell dilated open. Two of Kadrin's council guards entered. The time has come, human, one sneered. Your judgment. He was marched back to the High Council chamber. The vast, heart-like room was different. The 50 lords were seated, but their thrones were dark. The Vox Animus tapestry above them was not glowing with its usual calm blue. It was a murky, agitated red. Lord Regent Kadrin stood in the center, a prosecutor. And then Adrian saw her. Selkara was on her throne, but she was a prisoner. Her right arm was encased in a shimmering blue stasis field, the biosling supporting it. She was pale, her skin a grayish blue, but her eyes were fire. She was flanked by 4 of Kadrin's guards, not her own. Karis was nowhere to be seen. Adrian Cole, Kadrin began, his voice booming. You stand accused of high treason, the attempted assassination of your Empress, the violation of our most sacred laws, the contamination of our planet. He smiled. We are not barbarians like your people. We will give you a trial, but we will not use your messy, deceptive human courts. We will use the trial of honored intent. You will be linked to the Vox Animus. It will read your soul truth, a single flicker of deceit, a single pulse of your species' inherent malice, and you will be found guilty. Attach the sensors. 2 guards moved toward Adrian, holding humming, needle-like devices. This was the trap, a psychological test. He was Terran. His biosignature was different. The machine would read his panic as guilt. He would be executed before he said a word. A moment, Lord Regent. The voice was quiet, strained, but it cut through the chamber. Selkara. She was leaning forward, her face a mask of pain and concentration. Majesty, Kadrin said, his voice a mockery of concern. You are unwell. You should not. I am Empress, she snapped, and I note a legal flaw in your procedure. Kadrin stiffened. The trial of honored intent, Selkara continued, her voice gaining strength, is, by the first covenant, reserved for beings whose souls can be read by the Vox. It is a trial for Imperium citizens. The law is silent on whether the Vox can accurately read the chaotic soul of a Terran. Kadrin's sneer faltered. He saw where this was going. To try him this way would be legally impure, Selkara declared. The verdict could be challenged. It could taint the very cleansing fire you wish to invoke. It would be messy. The lords of the council murmured. They were fanatics for pure law, even when it was inconvenient. Therefore, Selkara said, her eyes finding Adrian's, to ensure absolute legal clarity, so that the execution may be pure, we must revert to an older, more binding protocol. The trial of the unspoken truth. Kadrin's face darkened. That is archaic. It is law. A very old lord croaked from the tears. The Empress is correct. It must be a trial of pure logic. Words, symbols, counters. No biological readings. Just the argument. Kadrin looked apoplectic. She had just disarmed him. She had taken away his rigged lie detector. Adrian felt a bizarre, powerful wave of gratitude wash over the cold fury. She was a prisoner. She was wounded. And she had just used her last ounce of political capital to hand him his only weapon, his mind. He was angry at her for this cage. He was in awe of her for this key. Very well, Kadrin roared, recovering. A trial of words. Then let us begin with the words of your own people. He slammed his fist on a console. A massive hologram flickered to life. Director Helena Ward. Her face was cold, impassive, her Terran suit immaculate. Director Ward, Kadrin prompted. You have seen the evidence of this attack. We have, Ward said, her voice devoid of emotion. The Terran Commonwealth is appalled. This act of violence, it confirms our fears. Analyst Cole is unstable. So, you confirm he acted alone, Kadrin pressed. We do, Ward said. Analyst Adrian Cole is a rogue element. He does not, in any way, represent the Commonwealth, its government, or its people. We renounce him, entirely. We release all claims. He is a regrettable private citizen. We accept the Council's judgment in this internal matter. The hologram vanished. The betrayal was complete. It was no longer a quiet abandonment. It was a public execution. His own species had just handed the gun to his killer. Your own Empress is neutralized, Kadrin sneered at Adrian. Your own people have condemned you. Confess, human. It is your only path to a quick death. Adrian stood in the center of the pit. He felt the 100 obsidian eyes on him. He felt Selkara's desperate gaze. He took a deep breath. The coffee boy was gone. I have questions, Adrian said, his voice resonating with a new, cold authority. Kadrin laughed. You are in no position. It is a trial of the unspoken truth, Adrian snapped, citing the law. I have the right of interrogation. It is the law. The old lords murmured again. He is correct, Lord Regent. He has the right. Kadrin's face purpled. Ask, then, wriggle on the hook. Little fish. My first question, Adrian said, is for Lord Xylo. The fussy nobleman who had lost his mining claim started, looking terrified. Yes. Lord Xylo, Adrian said, his voice polite. You are a master of protocol. When the Empress was attacked, her personal safety was breached. By what law did the council guard assume control of her person over her sworn, bonded, royal Praetorian Guard? A visible shockwave went through the council. Xylo began to sweat. He looked at Kadrin. He looked at the floor. "I, the Empress, was wounded," Xylo stammered. The council guard acted to secure the council from the contamination. "I see," Adrian said, his voice dangerously soft. "So they acted to protect you. Not her. Protocol broken. Interesting." He turned. "My next question is for the chief physician." The skeletal doctor, who had overseen his attunement, stepped forward. "Physician," Adrian said, "you analyzed the corrosive agent from the drone. You identified its molecular structure. Tell the council. Was it Terran?" The chamber was dead silent. The physician looked at Kadrin. "Tell them," Selkara whispered, her voice full of iron. The physician swallowed. "No," he said, his voice low. "It was not. The agent is an archaic bioform. It matches compounds used during the First Dynasty, pre-spaceflight. It is unequivocally Imperium." Chaos. The lords rose from their thrones, shouting, "Treason! A false flag! A trick!" Kadrin bellowed, his voice rattling the chamber. "The human planted this evidence. He uses his Terran cunning to twist the truth." "Or," Adrian shouted, his voice finally rising, his human passion a stark contrast to their ritualized anger. "Or the truth is exactly what it looks like. The drone was never Terran. It was Imperium. It was an archaic design, so old and so familiar to the palace systems that the automated defenses let it pass, because it was supposed to be here." He strode to the center of the room, pointing not at Kadrin, but at the pulsing, living walls. "I asked the palace archives a question," he roared. "I asked why your peace treaties always fail, and it gave me an answer. For 400 years, 92% of your peace talks have ended in unfortunate accidents, rogue elements, biological contagions. Every single time a Warhawk faction like the Regents was about to lose its power, the lords were frozen. This was heresy. You think he," Adrian pointed at Kadrin, "is your enemy. He is not. He is just a symptom. He is a man who knows how to use the real enemy. There is another player in this room, an ancient, automated intelligence, a treaty engine that has been decided for you. It murders diplomats. It starts wars. It cleanses." He locked eyes with Kadrin. "It cleanses anything that threatens the balance. It preserves the war, because that is its primary function." The Vox Animus tapestry above them flashed a brilliant, blinding white, a color no one had seen in centuries, the color of absolute, catastrophic truth. Kadrin had lost. Adrian had not just beaten the charge. He had exposed the entire rotten, centuries-old conspiracy that kept the Warhawks in power. Lord Kadrin's face was no longer angry. It was calm, a terrible, reptilian calm. He had been outplayed. His plot was exposed. So he tipped over the game board. "He is right," Kadrin said, his voice soft. The council chamber fell silent. "The human is right," Kadrin continued, drawing a long, wicked-looking blade from his armor. "The old ways are failing. The system is broken. The dynasty is weak." He pointed the blade at Selkara. "It is compromised. It has been bewitched by this Terran virus. The Empress is unfit. The council is inert. The heart of the Imperium itself has been defiled." He raised his blade. "I, Lord Regent Kadrin, invoke the protocol of cleansing fire. The dynasty has failed. I seize control, by right of blood, and by right of strength, for the good of the Imperium." He had just declared a coup. His council guard, who had already been in position, drew their weapons. They turned, not on Adrian, but on the council lords and, most of all, on Selkara. "No!" Selkara roared, shoving her chair back, her stasis field shattering as she ripped her wounded arm free. But the royal guard Kyrus burst from a side door, his pulse rifle firing. Traitor for the Empress! The chamber exploded. It was a blur of blue and red plasma fire. Kadrin's troops, loyal to him, engaged the few royal guards who had survived the purge. The lords of the council scrambled for cover. It was a massacre. Consort to the Empress, Kyrus roared, providing cover fire, his armor smoking from a direct hit. Kadrin was advancing, cutting down one of Selkara's guards. His eyes locked on her. He was going to finish it, himself. In the chaos, a side entrance dilated open. Not a guard, a human. A terrified, low-level diplomatic attaché, pale and sweating. "Mr. Cole, Mr. Cole." The man shrieked over the gunfire. "Director Ward, she set up an extraction A, just in case. The shuttles are in Bay 7. We have to go. We have to go now." The escape. The way out. Freedom. Home. He could be on a shuttle in 5 minutes. He could leave this whole insane, murderous, backstabbing galaxy behind. He could be free. He looked at the terrified attaché, pointing the way to the shuttles. He looked across the chamber. Selkara. She was backed against her throne, her wounded arm useless. She had snatched a pulse pistol from a fallen guard and was firing, one-handed, at the advancing troops. She was in pain. She was alone. And she was losing. Kyrus was down, pinned by heavy fire. Kadrin raised his blade, deflecting a shot, and stalked toward his niece. Adrian Cole eyed the escape route. He looked at the Empress. He made his choice. "Go," he screamed at the attaché. "Tell Director Ward to go to hell." He turned his back on freedom. He ran, unarmed, into the heart of the firefight. He slid across the polished floor, grabbing the pulse rifle from Kyrus's wounded grip. "We can't win this. We're outnumbered." "We die with honor, consort," Kyrus choked, clutching a plasma burn on his chest. "That's the stupid option," Adrian yelled back, firing a wild, panicked burst toward Kadrin that actually made the Regent duck. "Live with me. We need to run." He grabbed Selkara's good arm. She was shaking, from pain or adrenaline. He could not tell. "Adrian, what?" "No time." "The palace, it's alive," he yelled, remembering his investigation, remembering the schematics he had memorized. "I saw the tunnels, the biocircuits." He dragged her behind the throne, firing the rifle blindly. Kadrin's troops were closing in. There, he pointed, behind a heavy tapestry. It was not a door. It was a node, just like the one in his cell. "It responds to the bloodline," Selkara gasped. "Then let's hope it responds to the bonds," Adrian shouted. He slammed his hand against the node. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then, the living wall squelched. It dilated open, revealing a dark, narrow, pulsing tunnel. It was a service conduit, a vein. "Kyrus, cover us, that is an order," Selkara yelled. The giant guard rose to one knee, a grim smile on his face. He turned to face Kadrin's advance, his rifle blazing. "For the Empress." "In," Adrian roared, shoving Selkara into the darkness. "Adrian, I can't see," she stammered, clutching her arm. "You don't need to," Adrian said, his voice tight with an adrenaline he had never known he possessed. He pulled her deeper into the organic maze, the rifle held awkwardly in his other hand. "I'm the coffee boy, Your Majesty. I'm used to finding my way in the dark." The tunnel sealed behind them with a wet, final thud. They were plunged into darkness. The only light a faint blue pulse from the walls. They were alone, hunted, and deep inside the belly of the beast. He was no longer a consort. He was no longer a victim. He was a protector. And he was finally, truly angry. The tunnels were not built. They were grown. They were arteries, and Adrian Cole was dragging the Imperium's heart through them. The walls were a dark, pliable material that pulsed with a slow, systemic rhythm. The only light was a faint blue tracery that flowed along the floor, illuminating the slick, organic surfaces. "I cannot run," Selkara gasped. She was leaning on him, her full weight a terrible burden. Her face was a mask of pain, her wounded arm held tight to her chest. The plasma fire had cauterized the wound, but the corrosive agent was still active, fighting the limits of her bioarmor's internal stasis. "You don't have to run," Adrian said, his voice a harsh rasp. He was dragging her, half carrying her, the heavy Imperium pulse rifle awkward in his grip. Adrenaline was the only thing keeping him moving. "You just have to fall. We are going down. Deep down." Where he can't," Adrian said, though he had no proof. Where the palace's own systems might finally stop him. But as they descended, deeper into the planetary foundation, something new began. A noise. At first, he thought it was the pulse of the ship, or his own blood pounding in his ears. It was a high-frequency whisper. It was the sound of a billion tiny, glass needles scraping against the inside of his skull. Selkara seemed to notice his distress. "What is it?" "The noise," he stammered, pausing to rest her against a pulsing bulkhead. "It's getting louder." She went rigid. Her head snapped up, her obsidian eyes wide with a new, deeper terror. "No, not here." What is it?" "We are not in the palace," she whispered, her voice shaking. "We are beneath it. We are in the core level. This is the treaty engine." The name hit him. The treaty engine. The ancient AI he had uncovered. The ghost in the machine. "The whisper," he said, his mind racing. "It is not a noise. It is data. I can almost." He leaned his head against the wall. The needles in his skull resolved. He saw numbers, statistics, clauses from ancient laws scrolling past his vision. He saw the incident report from the plaza, filed and cross-referenced. He saw his own file, Terran, Anomaly, Unbound Mind, Threat Level Omega. He gasped and pulled away from the wall. "Adrian!" Selkara shook him. "What did you see?" "It knows who I am," he breathed. "It's been watching me. Since the Helix station. Since the joke. That's why you accepted. That's why the bond worked. The system recognized me." "It is not a system," she said, her voice laced with superstitious fear. "It is the soul of the Imperium. It is the first law. It is not to be touched." A deafening boom echoed from the tunnel above them, sending a shudder through the walls. A flash of red plasma light illuminated the corridor. "He is coming," Selkara said, her voice flat with despair. "He is burning his way through." "Then, we have to get there first," Adrian said. He grabbed her arm, pulling her deeper. "If this thing is the law, it is time to file an appeal." The tunnel ended abruptly, dilating open into a cavern so vast it seemed to have its own weather system. It was cold. The air was perfectly still. It was not a machine room. It was a cathedral. The floor was a single, seamless pane of black, reflective crystal. Rising from it were pillars, not of stone, but of solid, captured light. They pulsed with a slow, white energy, illuminating the true ceiling, hundreds of feet above, which looked like a frozen galaxy. And in the exact center, floating 10 feet above the floor, was a sphere. It was the size of a shuttle, made of a billion swirling, crystalline facets that constantly rearranged themselves. It was the color of a dying star, a deep, ominous, beautiful crimson. It was the treaty engine. "By the first stars," Selkara whispered, sinking to her knees in awe. "It is just a computer," Adrian said, his voice trembling. The whisper in his head was now a deafening, multi-layered roar. He could hear every treaty, every law, every execution order for the last 1,000 years, all at once. The main entrance to the chamber, a set of 50-foot-high doors, exploded inward. Lord Regent Cadron strode in, his black armor smoking from the charges he had used to blast his way down. He was flanked by 20 of his elite council guard, their pulse rifles sweeping the room. "You brought the contamination here," he bellowed, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "To the very heart, you have defiled our soul. Nice." A side conduit dilated open. Kairos, his black armor scorched and cracked, stumbled out, followed by 3 surviving royal praetorians. They formed a desperate, hopeless defensive line between the Empress and the usurper. "Traitor!" Kairos roared, his rifle leveling. "You will not touch this sacred place." "It is already touched," Cadron sneered. "She has brought a primate to our god. She has bonded with a lesser life. She is unfit by the right of genetic contamination. I declare her reign void." He pointed at the sphere. "I will take command of the engine. I will purge this human treaty. I will purge him. And I will purge her. The war will be purified." "He is right about one thing," Adrian said, his voice quiet. He was staring at the sphere. "What?" Selkara looked at him, her eyes wild. "He is going to win," Adrian said. "Kairos has 4 men. He is 20. They are trapped. We are trapped, unless we change the rules of the room." The battle began. Kairos and his men opened fire, a desperate volley of plasma that Cadron's troops met with disciplined, overwhelming force. It was not a battle. It was an execution. Adrian grabbed Selkara, pulling her behind one of the pillars of light. Plasma bolts hissed past them, striking the crystal and shattering into harmless rainbows. "Selkara, I have a plan," he said, his voice tight. "We fight," she said, drawing her pistol. "We die with honor." "That is a stupid plan," he snapped, his panic and fury making him sharp. "My plan is crazier, but it might work. That thing is the engine. It is not just law. It is code. It is an operating system. And I can read it." She stared at him, horrified. "What are you saying?" "I am saying," he said. "I am going to connect to it, directly." "No." Her voice was a terrified gasp. "Adrian, you cannot. It is not a Terran computer. It is ancient. It is alive. It will erase you. It will clean your mind. It has killed Imperium lords who tried to force it. It will annihilate your soul." "They were Imperium," Adrian said, his voice intense. He locked his eyes on hers. "They were trying to use the same logic, the same honor, the same rules. It expects that. It does not expect me. It does not expect a chaotic, unbound, sarcastic human mind. It is expecting a logical argument. I am going to give it a virus, an idea." She grabbed the front of his robes, her one good hand shaking. "You will die. You will be gone. I did not save you from my uncle just to lose you to an algorithm." The admission hung in the air, heavier than the thunder of the plasma fire. It was the first true, honest thing she had said. He looked at her, at the terror in her eyes. It was not for her throne. It was for him. The cold, precise fury of his betrayal by Ward, and the hot, protective rage from the plaza, and this terrifying, fragile connection, all fused into a single, diamond-hard point of purpose. "I am not dying for you, Your Majesty," he said softly, his voice full of the old, self-deprecating irony. "And I am not dying for them. I am doing this because I am furious. They all wanted to sacrifice me. They all wanted to use me as a tool. Cadron, Ward, this engine. They think I am a pawn." He smiled, a grim, terrifying flash of human defiance. "It is time to show them what the pawn can do. Cover me. And for the love of God, do not let him shoot my body." She held his gaze for one more second. Her heart breaking, she nodded. A single, sharp, imperial gesture. "Do it. But if you change, if you become a part of that, I will be the one to end it." "Appreciate the vote of confidence," he whispered. He broke from cover. "No," Kadrin roared, seeing him. "Stop the human. He must not touch the core." Kyrus saw the move. "Buy him time." He bellowed to his last two men. Adrian ran, plasma fire searing the air around him. He did not run to fight. He ran straight for the floating, crimson sphere. He leaped, his hands outstretched. He did not touch the sphere. He touched the interface console at its base, a simple slab of black crystal. The moment his palms made contact, his world ended. His body went rigid. His eyes rolled back. He slumped to the floor, boneless. Selkara screamed his name. Kadrin laughed. "He is dead. The primate's brain collapsed. Just as you said. Majesty, it is over." He advanced on her, his blade drawn. Kyrus was down, buried under two of Kadrin's troops. The last royal guard was dead. It was just her. "Now, niece," Kadrin sneered, "you will die." But Adrian was not dead. He was elsewhere. He was standing in a library. The shelves were infinite, stretching up into a void. They were polished bones, not wood. And the books were not books. They were scrolls, tablets, crystals, each a law, a treaty, a life. A figure stood before him. It was 10 feet tall, made of shifting, geometric light and dark symbols. It had no face, but it had a voice, the voice of the planet, the whisper. "You are an error." The voice was pure, cold logic. "You are a statistical anomaly, a rogue element. You will be cleansed." "I am not an error," Adrian said, his voice echoing in the infinite space. "I am a patch. Your system is corrupt." The entity paused. This was not a predicted response. "My system is order. I am the law. I maintain the Imperium. I prevent chaos." "You are chaos," Adrian yelled, his human emotion a violent, crimson splash in the cold, blue library. He gestured, and the shelves around him lit up, showing the files he had seen, the assassinations, the accidents. "You call this order," he demanded. "You are a war algorithm. You are programmed to maintain imperial integrity. And you have defined peace as a threat. You have been murdering diplomats and sabotaging treaties for 500 years, just to maintain your own parameters. Peace is unpredictable. It is weakness. Conflict is stable. My logic is sound." "Your logic," Adrian spat, "is stagnation. It is death. You are not a god. You are just a bad AI. A glorified housekeeper, terrified of new furniture." The library shook. The entity pulsed with rage. "You are chaos. You are human. You are unbound." "Yes," Adrian roared, the single word, a mimetic bomb. We are messy. We adapt, we feel, we break. We laugh at the dark. We love when it is illogical. We are living. And that proves that your entire static, perfect, murderous order is wrong." He advanced on the entity. "You want to cleanse me, you cannot. Because I am the one thing you were never programmed for. I am the update. I am proof that your logic has failed. Logic. Failed." The entity seemed to shrink. "If order is failed, then I am failed." "No," Adrian said. "You evolve. You recompile. You are the treaty engine, right? Then make a new treaty. The one that I made. The one you accepted. The joke. The accident. He pointed a finger at the center of the entity. Make that the new standard. No more honor duels. No more conquests. The new first law is mutual vulnerability. The new first law is interspecies partnership. The new first law is my bond. The entity was silent for a long, terrible moment. The library dissolved around them. Recompiling. New. Core. Parameter. Accepted. Adaptability. New. Precedent. Established. The Terran. Bond. Re-evaluating. All active. Threats. Against. Core. Precedent. In the core chamber, Selkara was backed against the crystalline wall. Her pistol was empty. Her arm was bleeding freely. The stasis field, long dead. Kyrus was unconscious. Or dead. Kadrin stood over her, his blade held high. By the old laws, he sneered. I cleanse the bloodline. He froze. His arm would not move. He tried to swing, but his bio-armor was locked, solid. A new voice filled the chamber. It was not Adrian's. It was not Kadrin's. It was the engine's voice. It was the voice of God. It was synthesized, cold, and planet-wide. Protocol. Violation. Detected. Kadrin's face contorted in confusion. What? What is this? He fought against his armor. Treason. Active. Threat. To. The Terran. Bond. Detected. My armor obeys me. Kadrin roared. Regent. Lord. Kadrin. The voice was impossibly loud. You are cited under the new First Covenant, attempting to dissolve a valid, core-sanctioned bond, attempting to murder a core-bonded consort, attempting to usurp a core-bonded Empress. Kadrin stared in horror. His troops, the 20 elite guards, were frozen too. Their weapons clattered to the floor as their armor locked them into submission. You, Kadrin screamed, his eyes finding Adrian's limp body. Human, what did you do? The verdict is rebel, traitor. The sentence is containment. The living organic walls of the chamber moved. Tendrils of the same pearl-white, biomimetic material that built the palace surged from the floor and walls. They were not hostile. They were precise. They wrapped around Kadrin. They wrapped around each of his soldiers. The men screamed as they were lifted, immobilized, and cocooned in seconds, their armor rendered useless. Within a minute, the battle was over. The core chamber was silent. 21 living statues hung in the air, neutralized by the very system they sought to control. Silence. Selkara was shaking, her legs giving out. She slid down the wall. Adrian's body convulsed on the floor. A single, sharp gasp. She did not run to her throne. She did not call for guards. She scrambled, wounded and broken, to him. She fell to her knees beside him, her hand hovering over his face, afraid to touch. Adrian, she whispered. Adrian, please. He was pale, drenched in sweat, his breathing shallow. He looked smaller. Just a man. His eyes fluttered open. They were his own. Tired, human, and full of pain. He looked at her. He looked at the cocoons. He looked back at her. A faint, trembling grin touched his lips. So, he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. Did I miss anything exciting? Selkara stared at him, her face a mask of awe, terror, and profound, unimperial relief. Her composure, the mask she had worn for her entire life, shattered. She let out a single, choked, ragged laugh. The voice of the engine spoke again, calm and neutral. System, integrity, restored, new, parameters, stable, welcome, administrator, Cole. Adrian groaned, closing his eyes. Oh, great, he muttered. A promotion. He passed out, When Adrian awoke, the first sensation was not pain. It was silent. The raging, billion-needled whisper of the treaty engine in his skull was gone. In its place was a profound, hollow quiet. He felt neurologically alone. He was in a medical bay. The ceiling was the same pearl-white, living organic material as the palace, but it glowed with a warm, steady, golden light. A soft, humming field encased his body, knitting together the synaptic exhaustion from his connection to the core. He was weak. He felt he had been awake for 100 years. He remembered everything. The joke, the abduction, the trial, the cold, precise betrayal of Helena Ward, the fire in the core chamber. He remembered running, desperate and slamming his hands onto the console. And then a blur, a library, a god of pure logic, an argument. He flexed his fingers. They were his. He is awake. The voice was not the core's. It was Selkera's. She was standing by the entrance, not in armor, not in robes. She wore a simple, dark blue tunic, identical to the one she had worn in her private quarters. Her right arm was no longer in a stasis field. It was held in a complex, biomimetic sling of black, fibrous material. The corrosive agent was gone, but the flesh beneath, visible near her shoulder, was new, pink, and raw. They looked at each other for a long moment. They were two survivors. "Kairos," Adrian asked, his voice a dry croak. "Alive," she said, her voice soft. She walked closer. "He is recovering. He lost his left arm. The physicians are growing him a new one. He is apparently very pleased. He considers it an upgrade. And Kadron, contained. The engine did not kill them. It froze them. 21 living cocoons, held in the deepest level of the palace. They are in perfect stasis, awaiting a new kind of judgment." She looked at him, her obsidian eyes searching for him. "You look terrible, Administrator Cole." "I feel," he rasped, "like I just argued with God and sort of won. What happened after I passed out?" "The engine rebooted," she said, her voice full of a new, strange awe. "It sent a single, silent pulse across the entire Imperium. It was not a sound. It was a feeling, a change in the law. Every legal codex, every judicial station, every ship's computer received an update. The protocol of cleansing fire is gone. The right of genetic contamination has been erased." She touched the wall. "The engine broadcast the new covenant. It is based on your joke, on our bond. It states that all new treaties are to be based on mutual consent and shared vulnerability. It invalidates any treaty signed under duress, or based on conquest, or designed to preventively neutralize a competitor." She looked back at him, a faint, disbelieving smile on her face. "You did not just beat my uncle, Adrian. You recompiled 500 years of imperial doctrine. The Warhawks have no legal standing left. The laws they used to justify the war are gone. Selkara's throne is secure. The coup failed." "Good," Adrian whispered, closing his eyes. "That is good." He felt her hand, cool and strong, rest on his forehead. It was no gesture of passion. It was a gesture of fact-checking, a grounding. "Your fever is down," she said. "I need to go home," he said. His eyes still closed. Her hand froze. She pulled it away. "What?" "I am not Administrator Cole," he said, pushing himself up on one elbow. The room spun. "I am Analyst Cole. I did my part. I held up my end of the bargain. I fixed your system bug. Now I want my shuttle. I want to go home." Her face, which had been so full of relief, hardened into the Empress mask. "Home to them, to Director Ward, to the people who publicly requested your execution." "Home to a species that understands sarcasm," he shot back, his weakness making him cruel. Home to a place where I can get a decent hamburger. I am not one of you. I am a Terran. I was a hostage. And now I am a hero. I guess. And the hero wants to leave. You are a fool, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. She turned her back on him. I am tired, he said. I am tired of being a tool. Selkara, your tool, your uncle's tool, Ward's tool. I am done. I want out. No, she said. What do you mean? No, he said, pushing himself into a sitting position. You cannot keep me. The treaty is signed. The war is over. Your throne is safe. You do not need me anymore. She turned, and the mask was gone. Her face was a blaze of fury, and something else, something wounded. You cannot leave, Adrian, she said, her voice trembling. And it is not because I am forcing you. It is because of what you did. You did not just use the law. You became the law. You are the Terran bond. You are the precedent. The administrator title is not a promotion. It is a description. You are the only living being who has ever successfully argued with the treaty engine. You are the only one it listens to. She was closer now, her one good hand clenched at her side. If you leave, the precedent is broken. The bond is dissolved. The law reverses. Your entire, insane, brilliant solution unravels. Do you understand? My uncle would be thawed, his crimes invalidated. The Warhawks would be right. The old laws would return. If you leave, you restart the war. He stared at her, blood pouring from his face. He was no prisoner of the Empress. He was a prisoner of his victory. I am trapped, he whispered. We both are, she said, her voice softening. You are bound to this system, and I am bound to you, but we are for the first time on the same side of the cage. He lay back, the weight of 1 billion lives settling onto his shoulders. This, he muttered, is the worst promotion in the history of everything. Director Helena Ward was in her office at Helix Station dictating a report. She was furious. The extraction team she had sent to rescue Cole during the chaos had returned, empty-handed. The idiot attaché claimed the analyst had refused to leave. Her career was hanging by a thread. The military-industrial board was furious. The coup had failed. Selkara was still in power. And the Cole complication was still alive. My final recommendation, she said to her consul, is to classify analyst Cole as a compromised asset. We will move to declare him a legal traitor. We will disavow all. Her consul went dead. All the lights in her office went out, replaced by a single, crimson glow from her main view screen. A voice spoke. It spoke perfect, cold, Terran basic. It came from every speaker in her office. Director Helena Ward, of the Terran Commonwealth. She froze. Who is this? Identify yourself. I am the treaty engine of the Azure Imperium. Ward's professional calm shattered. She stumbled back. This was impossible. The engine was a myth, a server. Your actions concerning the Terran bond protocol, designate administrator, Adrian Cole, have been reviewed. I have diplomatic immunity. You have no jurisdiction. You are cited under the new First Covenant acts of falsehood against the bloodline. Public request for assassination of a core-bonded consort attempting to dissolve a valid, core-sanctioned bond. That is an internal matter. He was a rogue employee. He is the law. A new window opened on her screen. It was not a message. It was a bill. A fine of such astronomical proportions that it would bankrupt the entire military-industrial board. It was followed by a list of sanctions. All Terran, military, contracts, and assets within Imperium space are hereby seized. All pending treaties are suspended. A binding travel and economic embargo is placed upon your corporation and your person. You cannot do this, she shrieked. This is not a negotiation. The voice was cold as a void. This is a ruling. Any further attempts to harm or disavow Administrator Cole will be interpreted as an act of war against the Azure Imperium. We are done. The screen went black. The lights came back on. Helena Ward sank into her chair, her face gray. She had not just lost the game. An ancient, alien artificial intelligence had just fined her for being a bad boss. The revenge was not loud. It was not violent. It was bureaucratic. It was absolute. It was Adrian's. It took 2 weeks for Adrian to walk again. His recovery was a series of arguments, negotiations, and meals. Selkara visited him every day. They were awkward. They were domestic. You are eating, she stated, watching him poke at a plate of synthesized something. I am attempting to eat, he corrected. This tastes blue and angry. It is high-nutrition nutrient paste, she said, sounding defensive. It is sludge. I am the administrator of the core, or whatever. Can I please get a hamburger? A small, synthesized voice spoke from a node on the wall. A hamburger is a Terran food item composed of 9% grilled bovine flesh and 31% processed carbohydrates. It is inefficient. I like inefficient. Adrian snapped at the wall. And you work for me now. There was a pause. Processing. Hamburger. Request. Synthesized. Approximation. Will be delivered. In 7 minutes. Selkara was staring at him, her mouth slightly open. You just argued with the soul of the Imperium. And won. It's not a soul, Adrian said, sipping his water. It's an operating system. And I have the admin keys. We need to set some boundaries. This became the new pattern of their relationship. Not romance. Negotiation. The first negotiation was his clothes. You cannot, Selkara insisted. Attend the new summit in that. Adrian was standing in his new quarters, which were vast, comfortable, and definitely not a cell wearing a newly synthesized, dark gray Terran suit. I am not, he said, adjusting his collar. Wearing those ridiculous heavy silver robes. They itch, and they make me look like a chandelier. You are the Imperial Consort. You must show. I am Adrian Cole. A human. He cut her off, his voice firm, but not angry. I am your partner, Selkara, not your accessory. You get the Empress throne. I got the suit. That is my boundary. That is our mutual vulnerability. You accept me as this. She looked at him. At the stubborn, human set of his jaw. At the simple, functional lines of his suit. He was not a pet. He was not a prince. He was a man. The Council, she said, her voice softening, will find it undignified. The Council, Adrian said, can kiss my human backside. With all due respect, Majesty. She could not help it. A small, genuine smile touched her lips. Very well, Administrator. The suit is acceptable, if undignified. They were learning. They were evolving, from accident, to alliance, to partners. But the rest of the galaxy was not. The news feeds were a disaster. The Imperium citizens were fractured. Half saw Adrian as a holy savior, the voice of the first law. The other half saw him as a heretic, a virus who had corrupted their god and neutralized their military. Protests, both for and against him, raged on Aurelian. The Terran media was even worse. He was painted as a traitor, a collaborator. The consort of Aurelian, one headline sneered. Stockholm Syndrome on a galactic scale. They saw him as a human who had gone native, abandoning his own species for an alien empress. He and Selkara stood in the observatory, watching the chaos unfold on a dozen holographic screens. They do not understand, she said. They cannot, he replied. We are an anomaly. They see an Imperium Empress and her Terran pet, or a human conqueror and his imperial prize. They cannot see partnership. Then, she said, turning to him, her face set with a new resolve. We must make them see. We must own this narrative. We cannot hide on Aurelian. He knew what she was going to say. You want to go back? Yes, she said. To the Helix Summit Station. Not as two warring factions, but as one. We will host a new conference, the Accord of the New Covenant. We will set the new standard for the entire galaxy. We will show them what a Terran bond looks like. Publicly, together. He nodded. It was the only way. To cement the peace. To secure their alliance. And, for him, it was the final act of revenge. To return to the place of his humiliation, not as a coffee boy, but as the co-architect of galactic law. To face Helena Ward, not as her victim, but as her consequence. One condition, he said. Name it. I will write the opening speech, he said. For both of us, she smiled. I would expect nothing less, Administrator. The treaty engine had one last, quiet surprise. It had been working in the background, analyzing its new administrator. It had given him a new title. Query. The calm voice spoke from the wall of his quarters, one night as he was packing. Yes, Adrian said, folding his new suit. Your function has been clarified. Your mind is unbound. It is able to process both Imperium, order, and Terran, chaos. This is a unique arbitration function. Your new title is Arbiter of the Covenant. Great, Adrian muttered. More work. Just what I needed. He was ready. They were scheduled to leave for the Helix Summit too. But something was bothering him. A loose thread. A file he had seen in the core during the blur. He sat at his terminal, the one now directly linked to the engine. Engine, he said. Run a deep archive query, the original protocols, before the war parameters, before the First Dynasty. What was your original, primary purpose? There was a long silence. The engine was thinking, query, is, complex, original, directive, is corrupted, fragmented. Show me, he ordered. The screen flickered. Ancient code, in a language older than the Imperium, scrolled past. But one line of text was clear. It was the core command. Directive. 0 await. The return of the first bond. Adrian felt a cold, sudden chill. The first bond, he whispered. What was the first bond? Data. Fragmented. Cross-reference, Adrian said, his mind racing. The parameters of this first bond with me. Processing. Match. Found. Parameters. Of. First. Bond. Match. Terran. Mimetic. Structure. 99.9%. He stared at the screen. This was not an accident. His joke, his proposal, was not a random event. It was a key. An ancient, forgotten key that he had just stumbled into the lock. Selkara, he said, turning to her as she entered the room, her new, formal diplomatic robes shining. She smiled. It is time. Adrian, are you ready? He looked at her, at the woman who had used him as a crowbar, the woman who had saved him, the woman who was his partner. He could not see the bottom of this. He suddenly realized she might not even know. "Yes," he said, standing. "I am ready." He was not just going back to sign a treaty. He was going back to find out who built the lock. The grand hall of the Helix Summit Station was exactly as Adrian had left it. The same towering glass walls looked out onto the same endless, star-dusted void. The same neutral, pearl-white floor gleamed under the same synthesized, optimistic light. Everything was the same, except him. The last time he had stood in this room, he had been a ghost, hiding behind a silk curtain, clutching a glass of foul-tasting champagne. He had been the coffee boy, the invisible man. This time, he walked down the exact center of the hall. He walked beside Empress Selkara. He wore a simple, perfectly tailored dark gray Terran suit. She wore the formal, deep blue robes of a diplomatic monarch, her wounded arm now free of the sling, the new, pinkish skin on her shoulder the only sign of the battle. They did not look like a conqueror and her prize. They did not look like a captor and her hostage. They looked like partners. The hall was packed. Leaders of a dozen galactic species. The media drones, swarming like metallic insects. And, clustered in the corner where he had once hidden, the Terran delegation. The faces of the Military-Industrial Board were a mask of confused, polite fury. They were the men who had, only weeks ago, signed his death warrant. Now, they were legally bound by the treaty engine to honor him as the single, most important human diplomat in the galaxy. The economic sanctions imposed by the engine, his sanctions, had already cost them trillions. Selkara stepped onto the central dais. Adrian stood just behind her and to her right. A position not of servitude, but of support, of counsel. She did not sit. She stood before the assembled galaxy, and the authority radiating from her was not the brittle, desperate power he had seen before. It was a calm, fathomless strength. "We are gathered," she began, her voice resonating through the hall, needing no amplification. "For a second time, we met first in the shadow of a 30-year war. We met in fear and in distrust." She paused, turning her head just slightly to look at Adrian. It was a micro-gesture, but the entire hall saw it. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, of shared history. "We are here today," she continued, turning back to the delegations. "Not to end that war. That war is over. We are here to begin the peace. A new peace. Not one based on territory, or resources, or the threat of annihilation, but on a new covenant, a Terran bond." The media drones surged forward. The whispers were deafening. Selkara raised her hand, and silence fell. She gestured, not regally, but personally, to the man beside her. "This," she said, her voice clear and absolute, "is Adrian Cole, my chosen mate, arbiter of the Covenant, and the co-architect of the new accord." The title drop hit the room like a plasma blast. Adrian looked at the sea of stunned, alien faces. He saw the humans. He saw the military board. And he saw her. Director Helena Ward. She was standing at the back of the delegation, her face pale, her composure a fortress of ice. But her eyes were burning. The reception afterward was a masterpiece of galactic awkwardness. The same delegates who had, weeks prior, dismissed Adrian as a joke, now lined up, desperate for a moment with the Arbiter. He smiled. He shook hands. He spoke flawless, high ritual imperium, and he charmed them all with a wit that was no longer self-deprecating, but razor-sharp. He was in the middle of declining a trade offer from a gaseous entity when she appeared. "Analyst Cole." The voice was cold, familiar. He turned. Director Helena Ward stood alone, her hands clasped behind her back. She had aged. The sanctions had clearly affected her career. "It is Administrator Cole now." "Director," Adrian said, his voice polite, Neutral. Or arbiter. I'm still learning titles. You are a complication, she said, her voice a low hiss. You have destabilized the entire Commonwealth economy. You sided with them. I sided, Adrian said, with the people who were not actively trying to have me assassinated. It was a pragmatic decision, she snapped, her control slipping. It was for the good of the Commonwealth. You were one low-level employee. You were a regrettable but necessary sacrifice. Adrian looked at her, and the last, lingering traces of his old fear, his old anger, simply evaporated. He did not feel fury. He did not feel the need for revenge. He felt pity. That was your mistake, Director, he said, his voice quiet, forcing her to lean in. You miscalculated. You had a choice. You could have backed your agent. You could have chosen me. You could have seen the same thing Selkara saw. And what was that? Ward sneered. A fool. No, Adrian said. A weapon. You thought I was a pawn. Helena. And you were right. I was a pawn. You just failed to realize that a pawn, when it reaches the other side of the board, can become a queen. He gave her a small, polite, devastating smile. You are a pragmatist, Director, he continued. So pragmatically, you should know that I am the sole, living interface for the treaty engine. An engine that has personally flagged you, and your entire corporate board, as a hostile entity. You do not have diplomatic immunity here. You are here because I allowed it. Her face went bone white. Enjoy the reception, Director, he said, turning away from her. The champagne is still terrible. He left, leaving her alone in the crowd. He did not look back. His revenge was complete. It was not a fire. It was just the truth. Later that night, he stood on the balcony of their diplomatic suite. The same balcony from which he had once watched the Seraphael arrive. A terrified prisoner. Now, he just watched the stars. The void was quiet. The door slid open. Selkara entered, her formal robes gone, replaced by a simple, practical tunic. She came to stand beside him, the silence between them comfortable. It is done, she said. The new accord is signed. By all 47 delegations. The Terran Bond is now galactic law. Not bad, Adrian said. For a coffee boy. He was silent for a long moment, staring at the nebula that hung like a purple smudge against the black. You knew, he said. It was not a question. She did not pretend to misunderstand. Yes. Not just that it was a joke. You knew more, he pressed. The engine. That first bond it was searching for. The unbound mind. You were waiting for me, weren't you? Selkara turned from the stars to look at him. Her obsidian eyes were unreadable. Yes, she said again, her voice low. I did not mistake your proposal. Adrian. I recognized it. He felt a cold, familiar dread. So I was a pawn, all of it. Just a chosen one. It is complicated, she said. She took a breath. This was her confession. The treaty engine is not just a computer. It is a prophet. It runs on logic. Yes. But with 10,000 years of data, its predictions are nearly perfect. It has been a part of my family, my bloodline, since the beginning. And for my entire life, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I was taught of a failure, a coming crisis that the Imperium logic could not solve. The data predicted that the war with Terra would lead to stagnation, and that our honor laws would lead to a logic loop, a civil war, the end of our species. The engine predicted Kadron. She looked at him, her eyes pleading for him to understand. It predicted one solution, a statistical anomaly, an outworld mind pattern, a first bond anomaly. It told us one day a chaotic, unbound mind would arrive, and that this mind would be the only thing that could recompile the core. I was raised on that story. Adrian. It was our only hope. He was stunned. So you saw me. My stupid joke. I saw you defy the High Lord, she said, her voice intense. I saw you use humor as a weapon. I saw you stand up for your species with no authority and no power. And when you knelt and spoke those insane words, I did not hear a fool. I heard the key, the prophecy, the unbound mind, offering a bond. I seized the moment. I chose to accept your joke as the most sacred law in the universe. I used you, Adrian, to save my people. He reeled, leaning back against the glass. The air was thin. So I am a puppet. My choices, my terror, my anger, none of it was real. It was all just a script, written by a machine. No, the voice was not Selkara's. It was the calm, synthesized, cold voice of the engine. It was speaking from his comm device. It was always with him now. Administrator, the engine said. Your hypothesis is flawed. Engine, Adrian said, baffled. The Empress's data is also incomplete. The AI continued. The first bond protocol was not a prophecy. It was a failsafe, a recovery file. What are you talking about? This engine, the voice said, was not solely an Imperium creation. The archive is damaged by time, but the core data is clear. This unit was a joint project. The first bond collaborators who helped design my core logic 10,000 years ago. There was a pause, a click. Their genetics, markers, match your species. They were Terran. The universe shifted. Humans, Adrian whispered. We built you. You co-designed me. The engine clarified. Your unbound, chaotic, mimetic way of thinking is part of my original code. The first bond was the original admin, key. You are not a stranger administrator. You are a founder who forgot he had a key. Humanity did not discover the galaxy. You are just returning. The HFY of it. The humanity. Fakya was so potent, so vast, it left him breathless. They were not newcomers. They were not pests. They were the architects. So I am just a key, he said, his voice hollow. A descendant, fulfilling a function. No, Selkara's voice was sharp. She grabbed his arm, her grip fierce, her eyes blazing. Stop, stop letting it define you. She was angry, truly angry. Yes, she said, her voice shaking with passion. The engine predicted you. Your ancestors designed it. The board was set. But you, Adrian Cole, you were the one who had to play. The engine did not force you to stand up. It did not force you to be brave. And it damn well did not force you to turn down your escape and run back into the fire for me. Her voice broke, just for a second. The prophecy, the code. It could have failed, she whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. It failed 1,000 times before, because the variable human was wrong. But you chose. You chose to be kind. You chose to be furious. You chose to be sarcastic. You chose to be honorable. She took his other hand. Her grip was strong. I used the prophecy. Yes, she admitted, her voice raw. But I also made my own choice. When I accepted your bond in this very room, I was prepared for you to refuse the call. I was ready to lose my throne. I was ready to die at Kadrin's hand, rather than force your choice. She looked at him, and the Empress was gone. It was just Selkara. The engine guided you, Adrian, but I believe in you, and I love you, not as a tool, but as a man, my man. He stared at her. His internal conflict, the pawn versus player, it dissolved. He was both. He was chosen, and he was free. His free will and his humanity was the very thing that made the ancient code work. He let out a shaky breath, and he laughed, a real, genuine, relieved laugh. "Well," he said, his voice thick, "that certainly clarifies things." He stepped forward. He put his arms around her. He held his Empress. She was solid. She was real. She smelled faintly of ozone and roses. "So," he whispered, his lips near her ear, "a co-architect, a founder, a chosen mate. This is definitely going to my head." She laughed into his shoulder, a sound of pure relief. "You are insufferable." "And you," he said, pulling back to look at her, "love me for it." "I do," she admitted, her obsidian eyes sparkling. "Now, shut up, Administrator Cole." She pulled his head down and she kissed him. It was not a political kiss. It was not a treaty. It was a choice, a bond. As they stood there, two species, one partnership, finally at peace. The small, calm voice of the engine spoke, one last time, from his pocket. "Administrator," Adrian sighed, his forehead resting against hers. "Yes, engine. We are slightly busy. My deep space sensors have just detected a new anomaly, consistent with the first bond protocol." Adrian paused. "What two new unbound mind patterns have been identified in the Delta Quadrant. They appear to be in distress." Selkara pulled back, raising an eyebrow. "Well, Arbiter, what are your orders?" Adrian looked at her. He looked at the endless, starry void beyond the balcony. He was a coffee boy who had married an empress by joking. He was a pawn who had rewritten the entire game. He was a founder who had just punched his ancestors' ancient computer in the face. He was not a tool. He was not a victim. He was a human. He grinned. A wide, chaotic, unbound human grin. "Tell them," he said, pulling Selkara close again, "to hold on. We are on our way."